Welcome to WordPress Basics. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what is WordPress. There seems to be some amount of confusion in regards to what WordPress is. So we want to clear that up right now. Basically, WordPress is a server-side script, basically a piece of code that is written in PHP. Don't worry if you're not already a PHP programmer or coder. One of the great things about WordPress is that you can do a whole lot of stuff with WordPress without having to know how to code in PHP. Of course, understanding PHP, at least the basics of PHP, will definitely help you extend WordPress, will help you, if you get into theme customization or if you want to do maybe create a simple plugin or something like that in the future, but you don't have to be a PHP programmer in order to work with WordPress. But basically what it means when I say a server-side script is this. PHP has to be installed on the server or the hosting account where you're going to upload the WordPress files. In order to have a WordPress run website, the server itself must have PHP installed and support PHP. It'll also have to support a MySQL database. So WordPress websites, basically, they're kind of like, at their minimum, they're made up of three components. There's the WordPress software itself, the core of WordPress that's written in PHP. There's the PHP that's running on the server that allows that PHP to be processed. There's the MySQL database that's going to store all the data that you enter into your WordPress website via content, basically. And I lost my train of thought. Then there's also the theme. The theme is what's going to actually output the data that's pulled from the database via PHP and basically injected or brought back into the theme. And I think a lot of times basically people confuse WordPress, the software, with WordPress, the theme. And that's what I really want to point out, is that WordPress by itself, it doesn't show you anything. It's just a piece of software that allows you to have a content management system. That's point number 2, capable of helping you build either a website, a blog, or both. So in terms of content management systems, basically you can think of it as it's a piece of software that will allow you, or build a back end to your website that will allow you to log into it, to manage your content, to publish new content, to edit or change or delete content. And once that content has been updated or added, it's the job of the theme then to actually display the content to the visitor. And you need to keep those two things separate, because WordPress by itself is not a theme. If you just simply installed WordPress with no themes, you would have basically a platform that would publish nothing. So that's one thing to think of. It is free to use, and it's completely open source. Open source basically just means that the code is not encrypted, and you are also allowed to, because of the licensing, you're allowed to change the source code of WordPress as well. And when I say it's free to use, it is free to use whether your website is basically a nonprofit or it is a for-profit or a commercial run website. Both are fully allowed through WordPress. I should point out that we are talking today about WordPress.org, meaning the WordPress software that you will get from WordPress.org. We are not talking today at all about WordPress.com. WordPress.com is also run by the same group, Automatic, that owns WordPress, but it's a way that you can build basically a blog on their server. We're not talking about that. We're talking about hosting WordPress on your own server and creating either something that looks more like a traditional website or more like a blog, or basically a hybrid that has both. And that's that for that slide. What WordPress is not, and I pretty much already covered this in the last slide, it doesn't create anything seen by the public. So without the use of a WordPress theme, basically you can just get this into your mind, that you're not going to see anything output unless you are using also a WordPress theme. Some of the pros of using WordPress: we already talked about the fact that it's free to use even for commercial sites, which is a cool thing. It is open source, meaning that it is extendable. Again, if you want to hire a coder, or if you yourself are a coder and you actually want to get in and start hacking away at the WordPress source, you are free to do so. It's fully allowed within the license. It has an extremely large user and support base. So because there are so many sites and so many users of WordPress worldwide, into the millions, there's a lot of information on the web in terms of, forums and all sorts of, blogs and websites specific to, talking about WordPress, etc. It's very easy to find information on WordPress. It's very easy to go find a support group, whether that be a forum, etc., to find help. It's also relatively easy to use. Of course, I say that, I should put quotes around relatively easy. The more you dig into WordPress, the more you understand what it can do. Of course, the more complex it can be. But as far as just basic use of getting up a WordPress website, creating content, using existing themes, it's actually very easy to use, and it's quite flexible as well. It is also very well coded and supported. So if you've paid attention to WordPress at all, you know that it frequently goes through updates, which of course is kind of both a blessing and a curse in terms of trying to keep current with WordPress versions. But it is very well coded. It's not a piece of software that's hacked. As far as when I say hacked, that's probably the wrong term to use. Basically written by people that don't know code. It's very well coded, and when bugs and or security flaws are found, it is also very well supported. Some of the cons of using WordPress is also, you'll notice it was one of the pros, it is open source, which does add some security concerns. By that I mean this: because the source is not encrypted, anybody can actually see the source that makes up the software. So if you have really talented programmers / hackers that can see the source because it's not encrypted, it is possible for those high-level guys to figure out workarounds or backdoors, or basically just find the vulnerabilities potentially left in the code. Misuse of WordPress can lead to slow-loading, unsecure sites. Now, I want to make mention that that's not to say that WordPress creates slow-loading, unsecure sites. You can't bypass that first word, misuse. We'll talk about best practices as we go throughout the training, but definitely you can have two different users using WordPress, even based on the same theme, and have one have a good, clean, relatively fast loading site that's quite secure, and another has a very slow loading site that is not secure, simply because the other user didn't fully understand the ramifications of their actions, and we're gonna detail those today. Also, it can be a target for hackers and spammers, simply because so many people out there use the platform. It just makes sense if you're going to spend your time messing around with hacking or spamming. You want to get the biggest bang for your buck, basically, and because there are so many WordPress users out there, it does become somewhat of a target. So there are some WordPress myths that we want to dispel, and here's WordPress myth number one. We hear this time and time and time again, that Google loves WordPress and all WordPress sites feature great SEO or search engine optimization. This is absolutely not true. Once you understand what WordPress is and what it isn't, you'll understand why this statement is in error. Again, understand that WordPress is simply the software that facilitates basically the displaying of content from the database to your theme. Basically just gives you the ability to dynamically call up content, store it in the database, and send it to your theme. It is theme dependent. WordPress themes while there are a couple that have been created by the WordPress team, and they come basically by default in your installation, most themes are not created by WordPress. Most themes are created by individual theme creators, and they feature a varying array of quality. Some themes are extremely well coded by individuals who not only understand how to properly code in HTML and CSS and understand how to properly use WordPress and the PHP template tags to call up content from the database, but many of those theme providers also understand proper SEO. So here's a quick example. You might have one theme provider create content on a page such that there's only going to be one H1 heading tag on the page, and that's typically the way it should be for SEO. One piece of text or a piece of content on your page that basically tells the search engines, this is my most important piece of text. If other headings are used on the page, maybe H2s or H3s, it's okay to use multiples of those, but typically it's considered bad form to use multiple H1s on the same page. Well, that process has nothing to do with WordPress. WordPress is totally outside of that loop. That loop has to do with how the theme is coded. And so if basically you have a theme that's improperly coded, it's either poorly coded or it's coded without, real intelligence or understanding of SEO, you can have, basically a beautiful WordPress installation with two themes installed running side by side. Activate one, and you might have a very well optimized site as far as SEO structure. Activate the other, and everything may just completely just go downhill and into the trash. So just understand that WordPress by itself is nothing more than the software that displays the content. When you're really talking about the fact that WordPress sites are great for SEO, it's really based on two things, both the theme, obviously it's also connected with the plugins and widgets, because those also control the content, but it's also incumbent upon you, the user, to use WordPress wisely, and we'll talk about that as we go on. WordPress myth number 2 is that using WordPress is dangerous because it is easily hacked. This is not true. Like I said, WordPress is actually very well coded. So it's not that WordPress is easily hacked. It's that, again, unless you have a solid understanding of WordPress security and website security in general, and you follow best practices, you can end up with an installation that is easier to hack maybe than average, but that's not again, it's not tied to WordPress as far as the WordPress core. The WordPress core is very, very solid. It's very well written, and like I said before, it stays, they have a team that stays right on top of it and a user group that stays on top of it to plug any known holes as they are found. So if you'll hear people frequently talk, obviously the people that typically don't use WordPress and they want to badmouth it, they'll tell you that, hey, WordPress, you're just going to get hacked. It's certainly not that you can't get hacked, and I'm assuming that probably most of you by now probably heard of the latest hack with LinkedIn this past week. Something like 6 million plus users basically had their passwords stolen by a hacker. So if a very large, very well-funded organization like LinkedIn can get hacked, then you have to understand that it is possible to get hacked. But WordPress by itself is not, just because you put up a WordPress site does not necessarily mean that your site is easily hacked. All right. As far as installing WordPress goes, there are a number of options. Some of them are hosting account specific. There are installers out there like Fantastico Deluxe, Simple Scripts, and Scriptoculous that are both easy and fast to use, but in our opinion, they are not the best choice. The reason that is basically is that they don't allow full control over the installation. Specifically, I'm most familiar with Fantastico Deluxe, but they make some automatic choices for you during the installation that set up your WordPress site to be kind of generic, and as a result of being generic, they create certain values that are easily known by the hacking community, and they basically reduce your site security just by the mere fact that you've used one to install. So we're not going to recommend that you ever use an automated installer or a semi-automated installer like Fantastico Deluxe or the others mentioned. Proper manual installation will take a few more minutes, but you're going to find that it's going to provide you a much more secure foundation upon which to build, and that is extremely important. It's wise to spend, another 10 or 15 minutes right at the very beginning to make sure that everything is done properly, because long term, the downside of skipping this step, could be catastrophic. All right, so that's pretty much it for the PowerPoint part. Now let's get to it. It's time to do some live training. Let me get out of PowerPoint. Back to WordPress.org we go. So what we're going to do basically in WordPress Basics this session is we're going to go through a full manual installation of WordPress and make sure that we explain the process every step of the way such that you fully understand it, not just give you information that says step 1, step 2, do this, such that you end up at the end of the session knowing kind of what to do but not why. We're going to do both. We're going to cover both the how to do it and the why to do it. So the first thing that you need to do is to go get WordPress itself, the WordPress software, the core that we need to upload to the hosting account. That can be found at wordpress.org/download. And I will make the point, because I know Jerry's itching to say, make sure that you say it. You don't want to get WordPress from any other location. So you might find that someone else offers the WordPress download from their site. Our strong suggestion is that you do not download or acquire WordPress from any other location other than wordpress.org/download. This is because, of course, that code is open source, and you can't actually have someone with skills, go in and recode WordPress or basically make some backdoors and then put the package back up for download, and you could be downloading something that's less stable or basically wide open if you download it from some other source. So wordpress.org/download is the only place to get WordPress, and they made it very easy for you. You'll see a nice big blue button up here. Clicking the download button, the blue button, will give you a zip file in .zip format. If you happen to prefer the .tar.gz, I think it's .tar.gz is how they refer to it, compression format, you can click the download text here. So I've already downloaded WordPress to save a little bit of time, so I'm not going to go through that process of it. Basically, I'll just click the button so you can see it brings up a window. It's going to allow you to either open it or save it. And then once you do that, just choose a location to save WordPress in. You'll also see that it adds the file extension, the version number rather, to the file extension. In this case, we are downloading 3.3.2. So once it's downloaded, you can go unzip it, and we can further the process. One other quick note before I get off this page is this part right here that says release notification. There is an email sign-up feature right here that will allow you to enter your email address such that when new stable releases are made, that you'll automatically get an email. Of course, this information is also shown to you inside of your WordPress admin area, but depending upon how often you're inside WordPress, it may be quicker to get updates via email, so that choice is yours. So before we install WordPress and we go any further, I need to make just a couple of statements in terms or in regards to security. When most people talk about WordPress security, they really talk about hardening WordPress itself. They talk about doing things to the WordPress installation to make it more secure. However, the subject is actually bigger than that, and while we will have a very lengthy, very detailed WordPress security session later tonight, what you need to know basically is this. There's about 30% of all the machines, especially if you're on a PC platform as opposed to a Mac, currently have some form of virus or malware installed on them. And the virus or malware can do a variety of different things, but one of the things that it can do is referred to as a keylogger. And if you have a keylogger installed on your PC and you don't know it, what can happen is each time that you basically go to a site and log in, it can actually log your keystrokes and send that data off-site. And if that's happening to you, basically, it doesn't matter how protective your usernames and passwords, how long and ugly they are for protection or security sake. If someone can just basically get your raw keystrokes, they have access basically into pretty much everything: cPanel, FTP, your WordPress installation, etc. So my first recommendation to you before you start installing WordPress on an area that you're really concerned with is to make sure that your machine is clean. For me, I basically use two. I'm only taking you over here to Malwarebytes, but Malwarebytes, bytes.org. They have a free and a pro version, but basically Malwarebytes is, for me, the best scanner I've found to basically scan your system to see if it finds any piece of tech that's running on your machine that you need to get rid of. I use the Avast. I use the paid version of Avast as my firewall and my virus preventer, basically, to try to stop getting viruses in the first place. And I use Malwarebytes to run on a semi-regular basis just to make sure that nothing got past Avast. For Jerry, you want to jump in? I forget. I think you're using just the version through Microsoft, right?
Right, Microsoft Security Essentials.
And that I think it's that product is more like Avast, correct? It's more like a firewall and a virus preventer.
It's a firewall, virus preventer, and anti-malware all in one.
Okay, so it does do.
Yeah, they bought a bunch of companies and brought them together. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you have basically two different resources to look at: either Microsoft Security Essentials, which I believe is free, and
yeah, it's free, but it only runs on Windows.
So. Okay. Fortunately for Mac users, the issues are less, although there have been some Mac viruses out in the recent past. So not being a Mac user, you're going to want to look into that. I can't give you some intelligent training in regards to protecting yourself on a Mac. How about you, Jared?
I'm going to disagree slightly with that.
Okay.
The Conflicker worm a few years ago was a major attack on Windows and was considered one of the largest of its kind attacks. However, the oh man, I just went blank on it. The Mac flashback that we just had a few weeks ago actually infected more computers than the Conflicker worm did. It was actually a larger outbreak on Macintosh than was ever a single outbreak of one kind on the Windows machine. So just because you're on a Mac, don't think you're safe. You actually need to. They're going after Macs harder because people are thinking they're so safe. But fortunately, there's a lot of good software out there. But don't ever click on a download that pops up and says, "Hey, you want to do a free scan?" or "Hey, we think you're infected," or whatever. Almost all of those are scams to actually infect your machine, and that's the #1 way that you're going to get hacked, by having malware.
Yep. So if you have a Mac, I would suggest that you do some solid research in regards to what is available to you. Unfortunately, I'm not expert on Macs, but if you're running on a PC, definitely take the time to make sure that your machine is clean prior to working on your sites and or client sites, because it is very, very possible, I know it sounds strange, but it is very possible that you become your own #1 enemy in terms of making hacking even possible, simply because you have malware running on your site that you're unaware of, and you're basically just giving away the keys to the kingdom in just raw username and password information. So with that, let's close this. I'm going to open up this folder and show you what we got going on. So I told you that I had downloaded WordPress already from wordpress.org, and you can see the zip file is here. I then extracted the files, and once extracted, it actually drops off the WordPress version number. The folder that you will end up with just says WordPress. So before we go through the entire installation, I just want to open up the WordPress directory or folder and just show you basically what's contained inside. So I'm just going to double click WordPress, and we'll take a look at the files that basically make up WordPress, the software. Pretty much everything that is in this package, other than the folder, also called a directory, as we go throughout this process and the training, you may hear me refer to this as a folder. You may hear me refer to this as a directory. They are one and the same, although from a technical standpoint, from web speak, web development speak, this is really a directory. So the WP-content directory is really the only thing that's kind of outside the WordPress core. This is where your themes and your plugins get installed. Pretty much everything else that's part of this is the actual core software that causes your WordPress run website to work. In most instances, except for a couple of exceptions that I will point out to you, you do not want to change anything in any of the WordPress core files. Pretty much for the most part, the only thing that you're going to be updating is the content or elements inside of the WP-content directory. So we will talk a little bit, obviously we do need to update the config file, and you'll see how that happens here in a little bit. We will remove some files that are actually not essential, and you'll see how that happens through the process. But just understand that if you ever think to yourself, oh, I'm going to open up WP-activate and take a look at it, and maybe I'll make some tweaks in that, I would caution you strongly against any of that, because if you don't really know PHP programming, you don't really know what you're doing, you can completely ruin your installation pretty much immediately. So just understand that pretty much everything in here other than the WP-content is really the WordPress core, and if you're going to be editing or adding or deleting anything outside of the WP-content directory, you really, really need to make sure that you do fully understand what it is that you're doing. Okay? So with that, basically installing WordPress is very simple. It's just a couple of step process. The first thing that we need to do is create a MySQL database, get the values from that installation, and then we can upload WordPress, and we're going to upload WordPress via FTP, or using a piece of software that FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. It's basically just a piece of software that allows us to upload information, data, etc. from our computer to our hosting space, and vice versa. You can download information from your hosting space back to your computer, among a few other things. But the first part of this piece, the piece of the puzzle, is to create a MySQL database. So the first thing to do is to log into your cPanel. And I'm going to make one quick note here. If you look up in the URL, you'll see that I am connected via HTTPS. Not all hosts allow this, but most do. and you're going to have to ask your host if they do, and if so, how to go about connecting to your control panel via HTTPS. In other words, connecting to your cPanel in such a way that the data is going to be encrypted as it's sent. So when I've already logged in, but if I were to back up, you would see the cPanel login page. On that page, I have to enter my username and password. And because I connected via HTTPS, that data that was sent as I submitted that form basically was encrypted and couldn't be easily sniffed by someone basically trying to roam and check for Wi-Fi signals, etc. So here's another piece of your WordPress security understanding: is make sure that your machine is free of malware, and if at all possible, when connecting to your cPanel, use the HTTPS or the secure version to do so. Same thing with FTP when we get into that in just a few minutes. If your host allows the connection to FTP via what's called SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol, then that is also wise to do so. Anytime that you can basically make it harder for someone to be able to grab your username and password, that's really what it comes down to, is a very, very good thing. If anyone gets access, to your username and password, then of course everything else we're talking about as far as security becomes a moot point, because they can just log straight in and just start running things as if they were the account owner, meaning you. So once you are logged into cPanel, you just basically need to find the area in your cPanel that has your database management. For me at the moment, it's right down here. You'll see there's a segment called databases, and there's some options inside of here. Inside of cPanel, I can click and drag these around. So if I wanted to take and move this to the top, let's say, I can move this up there and make it that easy to access there if that's something that you do frequently. So here's what we're going to do. Under MySQL databases, there's two options. There's the full MySQL databases, and there's this wizard. The MySQL databases option allows you to create, delete, manage databases. So you can have multiple databases typically installed in your hosting account. This is hosting account dependent. Some of them have a finite number of the amount of databases you can create. Some of them offer the ability to create many. But the MySQL database wizard, the second one, if you have this option inside of your cPanel, basically is just there for the quick creation of a database. It's not there for database management. It's not there for creating basically deleting or editing existing. It's there for one purpose, and that's creating a singular database. So I'm going to click that, and you're going to see that it says create a database. This first value here that we are going to enter is the database name. And you'll see that it is preceded by some text. It says live TURL_. The text that precedes this is basically my cPanel username. So my cPanel username is, and I'm exposing this to you live via this webinar, is live TURL, and then the underscore is basically just a separator between the cPanel username and the database name that we're about to create. So here's my point. My point is, it's not too hard for individuals to determine what your cPanel username is. As a result, it is very, very important that your cPanel password be very, very strong. If you have a weak cPanel password, if it's easy to crack by a piece of cracking software, if it's easy to guess, if it uses standard dictionary words, etc., your entire website security is at risk, because retrieving the cPanel username isn't all that difficult for someone with skills. So when you get to creating passwords, and if you have a weak password, I would definitely suggest that you reset it inside of cPanel. That functionality is available to you. But when it comes to creating all of these other values, we want to create values that cannot be easily guessed. Basically, they don't contain any dictionary words. and they are as strong as is humanly possible. To do that, I'm going to use a website over here. It's random.org/passwords. So random.org/passwords is basically a website that will allow you to, or it's a page of a site that will allow you to create random passwords for this particular use, or any use for that matter. Right here you see part 1, the passwords. How many do you want to generate? You can create up to 100 at a time. 5 is the default. And how long the characters should be says minimum of 6, maximum of 24. My suggestion is that you up the length to something along the lines of 12. It doesn't really matter. 12, 15, 20, something longer than 8, and you'll see kind of why here in a second. And of course you can generate more than 5 if you like. I'm going to leave it at 5 and put in a value of 12 for the length, and then click the button down here in part 2 for get passwords, and it's going to randomly generate 5 passwords that are 12 characters in length. One thing to note, that through random.org you won't see any of the funky characters. You won't see the % or question marks or periods or underscores or anything like that. It's simply going to be alphanumeric, so either a numeric value or an alpha character. Typically, whenever I have control over creating the password itself, I typically like one that starts with an alpha character, starting with a number, or especially starting with a weird character, like a %, something like that, an exclamation point. All right. I just got a notice that audio connection was lost and restored. Jerry, can you check? Can everybody just make sure that
I can hear you.
Okay, can everybody just type in real quick, or just not everybody, just somebody type in and just let me know that we're good?
We're good.
Okay, yeah. That's weird. I haven't seen that before. Okay, rewind. So in terms, or in regards to password generation, we may add some funky characters to this, but both Jerry and I do prefer passwords that start with an alpha character. Uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter, and that ends with something that's kind of normal. If you use funky characters, you can typically use it somewhere in the middle of things. So this one seems pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and just grab this one, and I'm going to copy that by Control-C. We'll come back to cPanel, and I will paste that. Oops. Helps if you hit Control-V. I'll paste that right here for the database. So you can see that the database took a value that is 12 characters long without a problem. We got a green success notification right here. So I'm going to click Next Step. Next, we have the ability to create a database user. You can see that the database was created. If you copy this value right from here, please pay real careful attention. This is something that I wish they would correct through cPanel. They have added a period behind it as if it's like the end of a sentence. that period is not part of the database name. We did not copy a period from the other site. And so if you copy this and you include that period, your installation will fail and it will frustrate you to no end. So I wouldn't recommend that you copy it yet from this page. You'll see the appropriate place to do so in just a minute. So create a database user. So again, right here there's a note though. 7 characters happen to be maximum for this particular database user. So even though we have 12, everything's fine. We can just take 7 of it. So I'll look down at a new one and I'll just start copying. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's going to be my database username. And if you go over it, you'll get basically an error message. So we've got a green check mark, so that part's good as well. As far as the password for the database user, they do actually have a password generator right here, and I can click password generator and it'll create this password. However, you will see that it starts putting in all sorts of funky characters, and while these typically they can work, they they can also cause problems. So what I'm going to do is, excuse me, I'm going to come back to random.org and I'm going to get one of these other ones. Take this one. I'll copy that one out and I will use it here. Actually, let me do this. I don't really want to do that. I'm going to paste this into a notepad. We need a running notepad of the installation anyway, so just call it database details. Right at the moment, I'm just going to paste this in. I'm going to go ahead and add maybe a period, and I don't know, maybe I'll add a percentage sign to this password that I got from random, and I'll go ahead and cut that, Control X, and then I'll paste it here, and I'll paste it twice. And you'll see that we got a very strong value, basically a strength score of 100 out of 100, and that's what you want. I would not recommend that you use any strength score underneath 100 for your WordPress user password. With that, you simply click the Create User button. And now you'll see right here where it says that that particular user has been added with the password of this to the database. Well, here is the best place or time to copy the information out. We need the database name, and it's this value right here, the full value, which includes the cPanel username underscore between becomes the database name. And I'll go back to my running notepad and I'll put that as DB name. So this is the database name. I'll paste that. The next value we need is the DB password, and the next value we need, I take that back. We need the database name, we need the database user, and then we need the database password for that user. So we have the database name stored. We just copied from cPanel. The user value is right here. The password is up at the top. However, we have to be careful with this one because there's quotation marks around it. And I'll point out one other thing. The password is the only value that will not be preceded by the cPanel username. So you'll see that the database name and the database username both have the cPanel username in front of the value that we created, separated by the underscore. The database password is simply the password that we created and nothing else. So just something else to note. Once you have that, I would recommend that you save this to a particular area. I've created areas for today's training, and I've already created a folder called demo-domain-com. Of course, that's not the real domain that we're working with, but I would recommend that you create a folder on your computer that basically you're going to put all of the data for that installation into. I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to put website details. So now that that's saved, we have the database name, username, and password. What we need to do is assign privileges to the user, basically telling cPanel what that particular database user can or cannot do as it tries to work with or interact with the database that we created. Now, here is just one quick topic, and we'll mention this again in the WordPress security thing, but one quick thing. You will see that some people advocate not giving all privileges. If I click this top box here, you'll see that everything becomes checked, and this particular user can do basically anything and everything it needs to do as it interacts with the database. If I untick this, I do have the ability to come in here and select, individual options. Now, from a technical standpoint, it is less secure to allow the WordPress user, or the database user rather, it's less secure to give them all privileges. The problem is that in the training that I'll tell you to do something much more restrictive. Even though it is a good idea from a security standpoint, there is also a risk. And that risk is that some themes and plugins require certain interaction with the database, and they might require interaction that you didn't define. So here's my point basically is, if you give the WordPress user all privileges, you're not likely to run into issues in the future when you install a new plugin or a new theme, etc. Everything should work just fine. If you decide to individually select certain things for that WordPress user to be able to do, you may find that you have problems in the future when activating a new plugin or a new theme, etc., if it requires the user to try to access the database in certain ways that you haven't given privileges to. So I guess I said all that to say basically this. Our recommendation is that you actually select all privileges, even knowing that it is possible to make a more stringent secure installation, because the downside is also significant and real, and you're just going to run into a whole lot less problems if you just assign all privileges to that particular user. Once you have ticked the top box and you see that everything is selected, you can click Next Step. And now you have basically a success. So you've added a new user, was added to the database, we've secured and copied off the password in that last step, and that task is complete. So that is basically the front to back process of creating a new MySQL database for your WordPress installation. And if I weren't talking you through and explaining all the hows and whys, that process literally only takes maybe 60 seconds to complete, maybe 2 minutes tops. So I'm going to go ahead and actually I can just go back to the home of WordPress. We now have a database. Now that that's done, the next step basically is uploading the WordPress software to our hosting area via FTP. And I want to, before I do that, I'll jump over to the training URL we're using for today. And right now it is here. It's livetrainingurl.info. And you can see that right now the server is entirely blank. This is the index, or basically the table of contents, if you will, for the root directory for this domain, and you'll see that there's nothing here. And if I go over to the WordPress login URL, you'll see that that page is not found, because right at the moment neither of those two, well, this page doesn't exist because there's nothing loaded into the hosting package at all. So what we need to do is we need to use an FTP client or FTP program. I'm going to use a product called FileZilla, F-I-L-E-Z-I-L-L-A. FileZilla is an FTP client that is available for both PC and Mac users, I think also Linux users, and it's actually a pretty solid piece of software. It is completely free to acquire, and I guess I should have put that up. We can go to, let's see, it's at filezilla-project.org. And again, just like we were talking about with WordPress, you don't want to go click on anybody's link to download FileZilla from any other place other than the actual source itself, which is filezilla-project.org. Once you get here, you'll have the ability to download either the client or the server. 99 times out of 100, you are going to want the client version, so you click this button. It's going to take you to another page where it's going to give you some options. You'll see if you're a Windows user that the download will actually come from an area called SourceForge. It's a website, sourceforge.net, which is highly trusted for open source software. You can see that it says recommended. You also have the ability to download it. Actually, that's coming from SourceForge as well. So the big green button is going to be the correct place for Windows users. If you are on Linux, it's one of these. If you're using Mac, you'll have to look at which chip you're using. If it's a PowerPC G4, if it's an Intel chip, make sure that you choose the correct version. And it is open source, so you can actually download the source code if you're a software coder, but probably for most of you, it's going to be either one of two things, either the big green button for Windows or one of these two versions for Mac. After you get the software and install it on your machine, it will look something like this. In order to connect to your server, you have to know a few pieces of information. This information will be provided to you by your host. So when you signed up for your hosting account, they would have sent you a welcome email that should have contained all of this information, and there should be information in here in terms of what information you need to connect to your FTP host. You need a username, you need a password value, and then right here you see it says port. And if I hover over it, FileZilla will basically pop up a tooltip that says the default port value or port number for FTP is 21. Let me try to do that again. And if you're using SFTP or Secure File Transfer Protocol, the default port number is 22. If you simply put in the host name, the FTP host name, the username, and the password, and you leave this port blank and click the Quick Connect button, it will use the 21 value, which basically will try to connect to your server via standard FTP, the non-secure variety. If you are trying to connect via secure FTP, you have to check with your host to find out if that's even possible. If it is, you might need to enter port 22. For some hosts, I know HostGator reseller accounts, they actually typically require port 2222, so a series of 4 twos as opposed to just 2. If you have any problems connecting to your server, just contact your host and they will definitely help you out with the information. This is the quick connect area, and I can simply just enter the values and click the button and it'll connect me basically to my server. However, for longer term use, you really want to use the site manager, which is over here. So if I click on this icon, you'll see it opens up a new window, and you have the ability to add multiple folders, multiple sites within the folders, etc. You can see how I have mine organized. I've got my client sites in an area, demo sites, in this case just this one that we're working with is inside demo sites. My personal sites are in another folder. I got a temporary folder just for stuff I'm working on that is short term that I want to delete later. You can work or organize yours any way you'd like, but basically the process is the same. You simply, if I wanted to create a new site in demo sites, I would highlight it here. I would create, I click the button that says new site. You'll see that I can give it a name. I typically name mine with the actual full domain and extension. So this could be just livedemo.com. That's not my site, but if that were, I would add that there. The FTP host name goes here. Again, you can put the port number here if you'd like, or leave it blank if you're going to connect via regular FTP. The protocol to use, if you use FTP, this is the standard non-secure version. If I click this, you can also determine or try to use the SFTP, the secure version. The logon type, you're almost never going to log on as an anonymous user to your own server, so it would be normal. And then here is where you would enter the FTP username and also the FTP password. Jerry, is the audio still okay?
It's okay for me. You did fade during 2 words, but
okay,
I could understand them.
Okay.
I thought it was me, so.
No, GoToWebinar popped up another nasty gram for me, so I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. Okay, so okay. Hopefully
everyone's saying it's okay.
Okay, good. one of the challenges of using technology. So the FTP host name goes here. If you're connecting via regular FTP, you can typically leave the port blank. You don't typically need to put in port 21. If you're going to use SFTP, you're going to need to put in the port value, either 22 or 2222 or whatever your host tells you is the correct port number for their particular hosting situation. The logon type should be normal, like I said. The user should be the actual FTP username. The password should be the actual FTP password. And then you can leave yourself some comments in this box if you'd like. And then when you're done, you simply click OK, and it will store that value for you. So I'm going to click Cancel. We'll open up Site Manager again. You see that since I didn't save it, it deleted it. The live training URL that we're working with today, you're going to see that I'm going to do something, and I want to explain kind of the why. Typically, I would connect via SFTP. I'm going to use regular FTP for this training only for one reason, and that's because when you use SFTP, it will typically log you out of your server more frequently than if you use the regular protocol, just for security's sake. And because I don't want to have to continue to refresh and re-log in and take up more time via this training, I'm going to use just regular FTP to connect for this training. But typically, I would enter, like I said, for me, since this is a HostGator reseller account, I would enter a series of 4s, 4.2s, and then connect via SFTP. But for this, I'm going to use regular. So with my information added, just like I just talked about, you can click the Connect button, and you'll see that it goes to work and it connects. The hosting account is here on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is actually my own machine. Let's see here. And that's where I want to be. So on the right-hand side, when you log in, if you log into your main area, it actually logs you into an area above or outside of your root area for your website. The root area for your website is where your actual website files get uploaded. We're actually initially logged in at an area above that, or outside of basically public view. So your host may use public_HTML. It may use something else. It's really dependent upon your host, but in most cases, you're either going to see your root directory is named public_HTML. It might be www. It might be htdocs. But if you're confused by that, just ask your host which directory name is appropriate for your hosting account's root directory. I'm going to double-click the public_HTML directory, and you'll see that it's now logged us in. If you ever wonder where you're at, you can look up here in this remote site area, and it'll show you specifically where inside your server you're logged into. And if you go inside something else, I'll say right now I'll go inside the CGI bin directory, you'll see that it's added now CGI bin to the path. So now basically if I work from my right to left, I know that I'm inside of the CGI bin directory, which is inside of public_HTML. So if you ever get confused as to where you're working, look up here under the remote site, and that'll give you the path clue to where exactly you are on your server. The directory icon with the double dots is basically how you navigate to go back. Basically, it's actually up one level, but you can think of it kind of as your FTP back button, as it were. So if I double-click this directory, it's going to take me outside of the CGI bin directory and back to the level above, or where I came from, which was public_HTML. So I'll double-click this, and you'll see that we're now back in the public_HTML area. And this is the area that we need to upload WordPress. So without making any changes to the WordPress files at all, what I'm going to do is, and you can upload, actually let me do this. Let me upload to a new tab. It's a blank page, so it's not quite so confusing to look at. We can upload WordPress a variety of different ways from our machine to our hosting account. If I wanted to, I could open up the folder where I'd stored WordPress, and I could have both of these windows open side by side, and I could simply click and drag right from this area over here. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is to use this left-hand navigation to find the appropriate area on your site and then transfer files straight from inside of the FTP client itself, from this area on your local machine to your hosting account. So it's really up to you how you want to work. There's not a right or wrong way. It's just something that's different. So I'll use basically FileZilla to do the whole process this time. So if I wanted to find something that was on my desktop, you would activate that first, and then once you activate that, it shows you the contents of your desktop. If rather I wanted to look for something that was, let's say, above that, it's inside of Documents and Settings, I would click that, and then it would show me whatever was inside Documents and Settings, etc. So you can see the C drive is here, and all of the other files are underneath it. So right for me, it's in the desktop, so I'm going to just click on Desktop. It activates the files that are underneath. Right now, everything is stored in this live folder and in session 1. So here's my WordPress folders. I'll double click it to open up that directory, and you'll see that I have now all of the WordPress core that we talked about is sitting in here. I want to transfer all of these files to my root directory, the public_root directory for my hosting account. Just make sure that you do not transfer them inside of the WordPress folder. If you took the WordPress folder or directory and basically moved it to your server, it would move it, but it still wouldn't work. It needs the files need to be sitting on the server in their raw form. Basically, the contents inside of this folder, not inside of this folder itself. So I'm going to double-click WordPress again. Once you see the contents, you start seeing each of these individual PHP files. You'll know that you're in the right area. The most important of all of these being the index.php page, which is right here, which is the default page for WordPress. I'm going to left-click on the topmost directory, in this case WP admin. I use the scroll bar to scroll to the very bottom. I will hold down my Shift key, and I will left-click on the bottommost file, which in this case is XML rpc.php. Doing so with the Shift key held down has selected all of them. And I'll do that once again. If you hold down the Control key, you can select individual files without selecting every single one, and sometimes that's appropriate. But if you want to select all of them, simply left-click to activate or to select the top, scroll to the bottom, hold your Shift key down, and then left-click the bottom one, and just make sure that everything is selected, and then you can right-click and choose Upload. There are a lot of files that make up this process. You can see right now inside of this queue there's a little more than 900 files. And it will start pushing those files and directories from my local machine over to the hosting account, and you can see those files and directories being populated here on the right-hand side. So hopefully my connection will be good, and this process won't take all that long. Typically, it's going to take, depending upon your connection speed, it might take 2 to 5 minutes. It's probably the lengthiest part of this process is actually just moving files from your machine over to your hosting account. So there's no way for me to speed this thing up without having done this on a different URL. So I'm just going to kind of close that for a second. So just to refresh or to back up and repeat where we've been. We initially downloaded WordPress from wordpress.org/download. Obviously, you have to have a hosting account that supports PHP. You need an FTP client like FileZilla in order to do the transfer or to upload the WordPress files to your machine if you're going to follow our manual installation process. We logged into our control panel, our cPanel, via HTTPS for security's sake, we created a new MySQL database, and we recorded the values, the database name, the database user, and the database password that we used when creating that new database. We copied it to a running file, and we placed that file inside of a, let me expand this, a new folder that we named with the website that we are going to be working on. Of course, for this, it's not accurate. It should be yourtrainingurl.info or -info, whichever you like to do that. And the last step basically is we've opened up the WordPress and directory, and we've uploaded all of the contents that we found inside. So let's go back and check on FileZilla, and excellent, we're almost done. Just a few more seconds to go, and this part of the process will be complete. And we have success. Okay, so now that we have uploaded WordPress, we created a MySQL database, we've uploaded all of the WordPress files. We haven't configured anything just yet, but we've uploaded everything. We're going to see that there's a change now. If we go back to our actual training URL, in this case again livetrainingurl.info, and I click refresh, instead of this blank index, now we're going to get something new. And what happens is that WordPress is smart, and it knows that it's been loaded into our root directory, but it sees that there's an issue. It says there doesn't seem to be a wp-config.php file, and that it needs this before that, that anything can get done, before we can get started to work. If we go back and look at our WordPress core files again, we'll see why that is. By default, they have named the file wp-config-sample. So because of the -sample part, it could not find the wp-config.php file, and this is the file that WordPress needs basically to know and understand all the specific configurations that you want set up. So since it found the sample file basically and not this one, it says, hey, I can help you basically set this up, and how that's done is clicking the Create a Configuration File button. Okay, it says before you get started, you need some information. You need the database name, database username, database password, database host, we'll talk about that in a minute, and then the table prefix, what could be said as the database table prefix. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then it says there's a little bit of information. If this automatic file creation doesn't work, don't worry. You can simply open the WordPress config sample in a text editor and basically fill it out yourself, and then just re-upload it as wp-config.php. So you don't have to do this work through this online editor. It's just easiest to do so. So regardless of how you like to work, you can open up the config file in a text editor and change the values there. Just make sure that you change the file name, dropping off the last portion, the -sample.php, when you upload it to your server, or you can use the semi-automated installer provided by WordPress. So click Let's Go, and I'll take you to this next page. Okay, you see that there's some values here pre-populated for you. We're going to change most of these. The first is the database name, followed by the database username, followed by the database password, followed by the database host. Well, this is the first value that we didn't actually store in our file. And so here's what you need to know about it. Most times, your host will actually use this value, all lowercase together, localhost, basically as the way that it connects to the database. So 99 times out of 100, you will not need to change this value. Should this installation process fail, the first thing I would suggest is that you go back to your host and you ask them if they use a value other than localhost to connect to the database. If they do, they will give you whatever value that they use, and then you just simply come back here and enter that value instead. But 99 times out of 100, this will work just fine, so we won't need to update this value. The table prefix, or the database table prefix if you want to be more specific, says it's used if you want to run multiple WordPress installations in a single database. Forget what this says. It doesn't matter if you're running multiple WordPress installations in a single database or not. It is never wise to leave the table prefix set to WP underscore. The reason that is because, again, remember that we didn't use Fantastico Deluxe or one of the other installers because we are trying to create an installation that was not generic, one that was unique to us and that would make our security better. Leaving the database table prefix as WP underscore increases our security risk, and that's not a good thing. So we can go back to random.org. We just need a string of something that's, not easily guessable, and I wouldn't recommend that you use a really long string. That information, is getting written. Basically, it's into the database, but something that's not WP and something that is random is good. So I don't know. I'm going to look at that portion right there of that first password. I'm going to use that. Let's see. I'm right back here. So I'm going to replace the WP portion with that value right there. And I'm going to store this in my running document for my website just so that I can recall what it was. All right. Once that's stored, make sure that you do not get rid of the underscore between. That's important. We can finish the rest of these details. So we have need of the database name. You can see that we have that information right at the beginning. So I will replace that value. We have the database username. Just be really careful to copy just the value itself and nothing more, and then double check your work. If you have a space, prior to this or something else, you can have issues. So make sure that you're very careful as you do the copy and paste process. And then the password. All right, so with the database name, username, password, the host left to localhost, and the table prefix updated, again, something other than WP underscore, you can click submit. All right, it gives you some silly little thing, calls it Sparky, and it basically says that we've made it through the installation, and now that we can run the install, basically this is going to run the install.php file. So if I click on that, it's going to say that it needs a little bit more information, and this is the same kind of information that you would use kind of if you were using Fantastico. It's looking for a site title, a username. The username will basically be what we use to log into WordPress, and then password, same thing. This is the information that we will log into WordPress with. The email basically that will be used for the administration of this WordPress installation. And then down here there's a privacy statement that says, do I want to allow my site to appear in the search engines or do I not? Now this value can be changed, let me do that real quick, inside of WordPress later on. But if you're working with a brand new installation or if you're doing demo work, I would recommend that you untick this and leave the privacy basically set to not show your site to search engines. It doesn't stop the search engines from finding it. It just basically adds a meta statement that says, please don't index my content or my links. Just gives them basically a little understanding that you're still working on your site. So with that, I'm simply going to type some temporary stuff. All of this can be changed inside of WordPress as far as the site title is concerned. I'll just put some information so you can see where that value is used. The username, you do not want to be admin. That is a very bad thing, and I'm surprised still that WordPress populates it with that term. Again, with the understanding that if you use admin as your username, and if this is a generic installation, that it makes it easy for the hacker to know, hey, try admin first for the username, and if it's correct, then hey, all I have to do is just crack the password field. I don't have to crack both. So don't use admin as your username. Use something else. So I'm going to use some other portion of one of these passwords as my username. And you don't have to worry that the world is going to see, posted by this value. We'll discuss that in the next section after we get inside of WordPress and start configuring it. But I am going to copy this value again to my running file. Make sure that I keep on top of that. So there's my username, and then I'm also going to create a strong password. Now, again, here is your opportunity to use a strong password. Make sure that it's strong. And again, I like using random to do it. I'm going to hit the again button and let it generate 5 new ones, and then take a peek and see what I like. And I don't know why I like that one. So I'm going to come over here and use that value for my password. You can see right here it says the password should be at least 7 characters long. To make it stronger, use upper and lower case letters, numbers, and symbols like this. So I guess we could actually improve this. So maybe I'll do what I did before. I'll paste it here first, and then maybe somewhere in the middle we'll inject, I don't know, the percentage sign, and then maybe we'll put in a period somewhere, making that even stronger. I'll go ahead and save that, and we'll do the process again. Might as well take just a few minutes to make sure that it's as strong as possible. And since WordPress is giving us some indication that it believes that using these kind of characters improves the strength of the password, we might as well use them. So here is the email that you use again for admin. So use obviously a correct email address. All types of notifications sent from your site will go here. And then I'm going to turn privacy off. I'm going to click Install WordPress. Okay, so WordPress has been installed, and it's going to show you again your username if you've forgotten it, but it's not going to show you your password. And you can go ahead and click the login button here, which will take you right to the WordPress login page, and you'll be able to enter that data. If we go over to or open up a new tab, just when you want to get back to WordPress, you basically just put in your full domain name / and there's 2 ways to do it. You can type in all lowercase wp-admin. You see that before this was a 404 error page because the page didn't exist. If I hit enter now, it's going to take us right back to the same login page that we just saw during the installation. Another way you can do it, since really wp-admin is nothing more than a redirect, it's up to you. If you want, you can type in / wp-login.php. This is the specific file that actually creates this page. So it's up to you. Most people just use wp-admin because it's easier for them to remember. But either way, it's going to take you straight to the wp-login.php page. And if I hit enter now, you'll see that it just stays right here. If I get rid of the last part of the URL, we will see that we now have a default installation of WordPress using one of the default installed themes, of which WordPress currently installs 2. And so I believe this is the 2011 theme that we're looking at, but I just want to point out a few things. You see where it says this is the site title. This bit of information we added dynamically when we created the installation here just a second ago. So some themes will output the site title, some will not. It's theme dependent. There's also a tagline or a slogan underneath that says just another WordPress site. And this is another value inside of WordPress that we will talk about in the next session. But this is not something that we created during the installation. It's something that's hard-coded into WordPress by default. But that's basically the entire process. We started from basically nothing to getting the WordPress download over at wordpress.org/download. The only thing, additionally, obviously, we needed to do this entire process was to make sure that we had a hosting account. And the hosting account had to support PHP and a MySQL database. We did the database work. We copied the values. We uploaded WordPress via FTP. In this case, we used FileZilla to do that work. And once it was online, we simply just navigated to the actual top-level domain name. And because it couldn't find the wp-config sample file, it basically took us through the online installation process. Now, in the next session, we're going to get further into this process and talk a little bit about some of the files that we need to delete. And we're also going to take a more strong look at the WordPress config file. If we go back and look at the server now again, I'll go ahead and click refresh and make sure that we're looking at the live site. You're going to see something. We're looking again at the root directory for our WordPress installation we just activated. You'll see that we now have a wp-config file where before none existed, but there's also the wp-config sample file. And so I guess right now actually we have about 2 minutes before this session is over. I'll go ahead and just talk about basic cleanup right now, and we'll pick up in the next session with covering the WordPress config file itself and basically give you a tour of it and show you some of the things that's not generally pointed out. So the WordPress config sample file, this was valuable to us to complete this process, but it's no longer needed. So remember how I told you before to be very, very careful to make sure that you go slow and you think about editing or deleting any file that's part of the WordPress core. You need to understand what you're doing. And so here's what I'm going to give you a step-by-step process as to how to clean this up. The first step is the wp-config sample file. This is no longer needed because we've completed the installation process. So this file we can delete. If you are logged in via FTP, and again I'm showing you this using FileZilla, once you click on the file such that it's selected, you can see that it's blue. You can right-click with your mouse and then select delete. It's going to say, do you really want to delete it? And this is your opportunity to stop and think and make sure that you know specifically what you're doing. Yes, you see it's still kind of grayed out. I do want to delete that sample file, so I click yes, and it removed it. Also, you will see that there is the ability to, or you can see a readme.html file, a license.txt files. These are basically 2 files that can be called up in a browser, and I'll show you that here right now. So let's say that we're at our site and we want to put in /readme.html, and we hit enter. It's going to show us this page. That's calling up that page from our own server. So here's one of the first things that you need to know is it's not like some huge deal. Some people will make it out to be a lot bigger than it is, but it is best to try to hide the WordPress version number if at all possible. Sites that are running older versions of WordPress, if it's, especially if it's less than 3.0, 2.8, 2.9, something like that, a hacker automatically can see the version number and say, oh, okay, let me open up my log and find out what hacks were the easiest to do on a WordPress site running, let's say, 2.9. And if they know the version number, it just makes it easier for them to go ahead and start the hacking process. So removing this file is good. It's just here for your own benefit temporarily, but it's not something I would leave on the server. Same thing with the license file. You can see that it can also be called up. Now, this doesn't necessarily have the specific WordPress version in it, but there are some basically rabbit trails that'll let you know what version it might be. There's dates and stuff listed, and so this is just not a file that you need either. It's not that it's going to cause you any necessarily security grief, but it just doesn't need to be here. So both of those files, the license.txt and the readme.file, and thankfully they're right next to each other. You can left click on this one, right click, delete, say yes, and then the same thing. Left click on the readme, right click, choose delete. Again, just go slow and make sure that you're deleting the right things. Those two files can go as well. And then also inside of the WP admin directory, if I double click it, scroll down, you're going to find two other files that we don't need any longer. There's the install.php file, and right above it, install-helper. Both of these files were used basically to go through that online process, and we no longer need them. So again, install.php, and right above it, install-helper.php. These are the only two files that you should be touching inside of WP admin. So left click on one of them to activate it, right click, choose delete. Same thing with install helper. And now that those two files are gone, as well as the wp-config-sample file and the license.txt and the readme.html, your installation has already improved from a security standpoint. Hi, Jerry.
Hi. I just wanted to point one thing out before we wrap this session up, and that is you deleted wp-config-sample.php. You still need wp-config. That's the configuration, and that's the live one. Do not delete that. Otherwise, everything will stop working.
Yep.
There was some confusion.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's only the sample file. The sample file is there just temporarily as a helper, but when you go through that online process that we just showed you, it will create dynamically live the actual wp-config.php file, the one that I have selected here. And once the process is done, the only file, like Jerry just said, the only file that you can delete, that you should delete, is the wp-config-sample.php file. Now, if the world came to an end and you accidentally deleted this file, I'm not going to show you the entire process, but basically this file still resides inside of your package that you downloaded from WordPress. It's still over here. Of course, it's called wp-config-sample. So what you'd have to do is open this file in an editor, a text editor, and then you would have to update the values manually and then re-upload that file as wp-config, and everything would work again. And you don't have to worry about that, because actually that's what we're going to start with in the next session.